Okay.
Kamal, will you please mute your device?
Dear colleagues, dear friends, my name is Tatiana. I am professor of High School of Economics Moscow University. I am glad to. Oh, I am sorry, Shahla. Maybe you say your colleague. There's some problem with his sound.
سینا لطفاً میشه میوت کنید صدا میاد نویز میاد از سمت شما.
Okay.
Thank you, Sina.
Thank you. Let me introduce you my colleague and friend, Dr. Shahla Mehrgani, Doctor of Religious Studies and Baha'i theologist from Sheffield University. She is now teaching and researching in Sheffield, and her family is in Shiraz, I know. And her report is the comparative study of Catholic theology of liberation and Baha'i system of Ruhi. You are welcome, dear Shahla.
Hi, good evening, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. And I also have invited my friends, and I didn't know when I invited them that we will overnumber you in here. So, okay, let me share my screen with you.
Do you have a presentation you need?
Yes, I have a PowerPoint, and I'm going to share my screen now.
Yeah, Всеволод, dear Всеволод Zolotukhin, can you open the demonstration of screen? Okay, thank you.
Can you see my screen now? Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me. And this presentation is my recent research on the comparison between liberation theology of Catholicism in South America and Ruhi system in Baha'i faith. Before I start, I want to say a huge thank you to my friends and colleagues from Shiraz, Iran. They are here, some of them are here this evening to support me and cheer me up. I have brought my own cheerleaders with me. In this group, we came up with the comparison between liberation theology and the system. They helped me with the categories of comparison, and I just want to give them credit and thank them one by one in an alphabetical order. This is the header of our group, of WhatsApp group, which means the name of the group means friendly gathering. So they are here: Azam, Farzad, Ismail, Kamalu, Mehrzad, Nadia, and Sohela. I want to say a huge thank you to them, and especially because today they are also here to support me. I don't know which monitor you can see, if it's the presentation monitor or the slide by slide monitor, but anyway, it's I'm just going to move on to the presentation. I hope that I'm going to I will be able to meet the deadline and the time limit that you have mentioned, the 40 minutes. So in this end, I'm going to read through some of the parts of my paper. Baha'is are a sociologically interesting group. Religious practice among the Baha'is is based on their perception of the scripture. There are numerous scriptures in the Baha'i faith which have constantly been released since its revelation in 1844. Baha'is read their scriptures individually, share their perceptions together, and put their final understandings and interpretations into practice. Hence, the scriptures, as well as Baha'is' individual and collective interpretations, are crucial for understanding their activities and behaviors. Baha'i community does not include any spiritual hierarchy, namely clergy, ministry, or priesthood. Religious practice among Baha'is based on their self-efforts on perception of the scriptures. They also commit their efforts for community building through their scriptures. They also commit their efforts for community building through their management system called the Baha'i Administrative Order, on the top of which is the Universal House of Justice. Since 1996, Baha'is have shifted their world-building efforts and aimed to align with the purpose activities. Purposes and activities of the new Ruhi Institutes. This change effectively changed the Baha'is' aims and their community building endeavors all over the world. So that is why I am going to blend this presentation from primary and secondary sources from Baha'i faith, as well as liberation theology. Also field work, a small piece of research includes 9 active Baha'is, and by active Baha'is I mean those who are actively working in the core activities of Ruhi system from Europe, Middle East, Africa, 6 ladies, 3 gentlemen, and the range of their age is from early 20s to early 60s. So this paper seeks to demonstrate fundamental similarities between the Ruhi system in Baha'i faith and liberation theology in Latin American countries. To introduce them, I just changed the wrong slide. Do you see my slides, Tatiana? Okay, now the liberation theology slide is on. All right, okay. Liberation theology is a new type of theology that emerged in the 20th century and quickly found its place among the disadvantaged masses. The political geography of this theological discourse is Latin American countries that were struggling in the 20th century with 2 major problems: foreign colonialism and internal tyranny, including poverty, deprivation, and inequality. As population growth continued to increase under such circumstances, the institutions of government, by abusing the teachings of classical Christianity, tried to justify the situation in their favor. And these governments were usually puppets of the old colonists like Spain, Portugal, England, and the United States of America. To some extent, were in contact with the Roman Catholic Church, and in various ways try to use the Catholic Church's teachings and religious authority to maintain the status quo. The term liberation theology is, in theory, referred to as any theology that addresses or deals with cruel conditions. In this sense, for some scholars, feminist theology and Black theology can also be regarded as a kind of liberation theology. However, the term is used for an approach to Christian theology rooted in Latin American circumstances in the 1960s and 1970s. This theological movement considers the most important roots of the misery of the poor in Latin American societies to be authoritarian, military, and dependent on the great superpowers and colonial powers of North American and European countries. It is the duty of the Church to protect the deprived and to resist against oppressors so that all may attain emancipation and the kingdom of heaven. These theologies insisted on the need of poverty alleviation and independence through the struggle, education, and awareness of the masses. In these theologies, the church must obtain its legitimacy by liberating the poor from poverty. The Bible should be interpreted and experienced from the perspective of the poor. At the beginning of the 1970s, many Latin American countries joined this movement, but the price they had to pay to resist the existing situation was too high. They had lost many of the members in a bloody battle that swept across the area. Despite the opposition of Pope John Paul II, this movement could attract many followers and maintain the idea that the effort towards the betterment of the life of the poor is a significant part of their Christian belief system. Ruhi system in the Baha'i faith. The Ruhi Institute is an educational institution established and managed by National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Colombia. The Ruhi Institute, in its statement of purpose and methods, declared that they dedicate their efforts to the development of human resources for the spiritual, social, and cultural development of Colombian people. In 2001, the Universal House of Justice, the head of the Baha'i community, declared that the programs and curriculums of the Ruhi Institute should be considered as the core activities among the Baha'is and asked all Baha'is all around the world to pass these programs and engage in its core activities, including devotional sessions, children's classes, study circles, and later junior youth sessions. The main difference is that the liberation theology could easily establish another movement or a version of Christianity. However, Baha'is apply the Ruhi system within the training institute as the mainstream practice of the faith because the central leadership establishment of the Baha'is has adopted and supported it. Nothing, at least so far, could lead to sectarianism in the Baha'i faith. Nothing matters more among the Baha'is than their unity and oneness. So even though many Baha'is disagree, or at least not very fond of the Ruhi system, like myself, they would not stand against it and jeopardize the unity among the Baha'is. There is a very small literature regarding this area, comparing Ruhi system or Baha'i faith to liberation theology. I found very few literature about this matter. They suggest that Saint Francis of Assisi provides an example from 13th century as an example of liberation theology, the old one. Saint Francis found his inspiration in Jesus, and he worked with the poor and the sick. The literature also considers Martin Luther as one of the liberation theologians because Martin Luther, a humble monk who led the Reformation in the 16th century, agonized over the scriptures. He found it difficult to accept that the oppressive political, socio-economic structure of his time, supported by self-interested, powerful church, was God's will. So he was also considered as one of the liberation theologians of all times. They also considered Gandhi, who was basically a Hindu, as also a liberation theologian, because he was influenced by Jesus' story and also by Sermon on Mount. Juan Cole, one of the previous Baha'i scholars, suggests that Jesus, Buddha, and Baha'u'llah believe in priority for the poor over the rich. They gave serious responsibility to individuals, institutes, and the state regarding the welfare of the poor. Juan Cole also suggests that since the 1960s, masses of peasants, both men and women, have entered the Baha'i faith in India, Africa, and Latin America. The typical Baha'is in the 1960s is the poor villager in the global south. Even in the United States, about 1/3 of the national community consists of African Americans, and 1/3 of them in turn live in South Carolina and Northern Georgia, two of the least wealthy areas in the country. Juan Cole suggests that by a Baha'i theology of liberation, he means a theology that is grounded in a special commitment to the poor and the workers that includes their perspective in the consideration of the scriptural meaning, and that underpins reformist thought and social actions by them and by others in solidarity with them. To compare these two systems, we in our group came up with some items that are listed here in this slide. You can see them. And I'm going to explain them one by one, both from the writings from Ruhi system, also liberation theology, and blended with the response coming from my fieldwork research. The first similarity is time and space. When some talented priests from Latin American countries returned to their countries in the late 1960s, they found out that their education and training should be translated into the conservative version of theology in their countries. Gustavo Gutierrez from Peru and Juan Luis Segundo from Uruguay returned from Europe ready to accept the challenge from Vatican II for a renewed, socially committed Christian community. They had studied Marx and Freud along with Augustine and Aquinas and were ready to welcome modern ideas of sociology, psychology, economics, and politics to their theological opinions. They noticed that people in Latin America had been dehumanized because of poverty and political violence. They realized it was not possible for poor people to even think about God while they were turned into non-persons by economic exploitation and political oppression. At the Medellin, Colombia Assembly of the Bishops in 1968, a document was issued which called for the fundamental renovation of the Latin American Church along with the socio-political structures of the entire continent of Latin America. Soon after that, Gustavo Gutierrez published a theology of liberation in which he stated that Christians should be committed themselves to liberate the poor from poverty and oppression. The title of this book was soon applied to the theological and pastoral movement that had already been started in the late 1960s. Farzam Arbab, principal founder of the Ruhi Institute and the Ruhi Foundation, states that he became familiar with the subject of development in 1971 when he was invited to participate in interdisciplinary research on an integrative approach towards rural development while he was a visiting professor in the Universidad Valle in Colombia. He mentioned that he did not approve of the group's approach towards development. That project tried to challenge the issue of poverty and justice in rural environments in Colombia. Their main concern was to modernize the rural societies in Colombia as an outcome of development. He had significant disagreement with the entire group, and hence he gradually distanced himself from them, and with some colleagues' help, he founded Foundation for Application and Teaching of Science. At the same time, he started the Ruhi system for training Baha'i teachers with the similar philosophy and doctrine as Fondaik, both in Colombia. So the next part of similarity social construction of religion. Liberation theology and the Ruhi system share the idea that religiosity is socially constructed. For liberation theologians, sin is based on the structure of a given society. They argue that the main challenge is to liberate people from structural sin. They suggest that people in different societies, because of the corrupted structures of their society, commit structural sin. Accordingly, sin happens because of social institutions. And to liberate people from the sin, they should be liberated from the corrupted structures. And to do that, they suggest interpreting the Bible in the manner that serves the purpose, and also to select their priorities and prioritize the verses and refer to the poor or how Jesus supported the poor. Liberation theology also suggests that the concept of God is socially constructed, and each society needs their own understanding of God, and they should have separate different theologies. Accordingly, they do not believe in universal theology, in universal theologies or meta-narratives or meta-interpretations of the Holy Scriptures. The concepts of theology, God, and sin are not universal, generalizable ideas. On the contrary, they believe that the concepts are historical, cultural, and evolving matters. Accordingly, they oppose the academic theology that promotes a universal meta-narrative of theology, God, sin, and liberation. They suggest that theology should be local instead of universal and should be produced in local institutions at three levels. It starts with the real experience of local believers in their everyday lives, which is then sorted and organized at the middle level. After that, it is passed to the higher level. The higher level is informed by everyday life of experiences of the believers and produces a practical version of theology that can be applied by and inspire other people all over the continent. Otherwise, it will only be another armchair theory, which is not relevant to people's real problems and issues. Christianity should stop making general statements and instead practically help to liberate the poor. Based on these opinions, their field of interest is grassroots, which is the local level of actions, and see individuals as responsible for liberating themselves from poverty and oppression, as well as the production of their own theological knowledge. In the same way, Ruhi system tries to study the words of God together in the local area, understand and interpret it together, and then they try to apply it in their everyday life. After that, they will document their experience and share it with the cluster coordinators, and then they will share the findings and understandings and experiences with the counselors in continental and international levels. And eventually, all the experiences and grassroots efforts and learnings become documented and will be passed to the Baha'is all over the world. So similarly for them, three levels of production of knowledge, starting from the grassroots and ending at the universal level, matters, and not the other way around. Therefore, for both, grassroots theology and knowledge matters more than academic theology. Accordingly, theology is socially constructed and is based on time, locality, and specific individuals. Now I present to you some of the answers of my participants. As you can see here in this slide, my participants also suggest that Baha'i writings are like compass. In general, they give you a framework of good and evil. Our understanding of them are relative and evolving. Within the study circle, which is the sessions in Ruhi system, within the study circle, through consultation, You will get a broader as well as deeper understanding of their meanings and their examples in everyday life. Another said, our understandings are tested while practicing them within our everyday life. Another said, a general perception happens during this everyday practice of our perceptions and gradually form our knowledge. One of my participants was a little bit more radical than others. So she said there are still deviations from a correct opinion. She believed in correct and wrong understandings. However, she said we will always make mistakes, but it doesn't matter as long as we are prepared to amend the irrelevant interpretations. Another participant said the creativity of the Word of God allows us to maneuver on various opinions and perceptions. That is the miracle of the Word of God. Everybody can understand and practice it in their own way. Perception and practice does not happen just once. It is a lifetime process. So this is the way my participants see understanding and their religiosity and their perception from these scriptures. Justice and prosperity of humanity. There is no doubt how much liberation theology is related to the liberation of the poor and establishment of justice in Latin American society in its original version and for all the oppressed and marginalized groups, including Black people, women, and other oppressed and exploited people all over the world. Therefore, they strongly take opposition against Western liberalism and the structural poverty that is related to it. Liberation theologians suggest that God cannot be neutral because being neutral is supporting the rich and oppressors. Hence, in their opinion, not only should God side with the poor against the oppressors, but the Bible should be interpreted in favor of the poor and the oppressed. According to their experience, the main oppressor, especially regarding Latin American oppressions, is Western liberalism. Similarly, the Ruhi system and its leaders and founders made strong statements in support of the poor and the establishment of justice in local society. Farzam Arbab, founder of the Ruhi system and Fondaik, states that he was not comfortable with the Western meaning of development, which would promote the same modernization and liberalism that is applied in Western countries and would eventually lead to the exploitation and oppression in so-called underdeveloped countries. Arbab and other co-founders of Fondaik and Ruhi state that their main aim for the establishment of this organization is to establish their own version of development in rural areas by empowerment and development of the poor regarding the requirements of their local development. My participants' opinions in this regard was rather interesting. One of them said, the system changes people's mindset and prospects so they will earn more money and aim for a better lifestyle. Another participant from Africa told me that some families turned into her and told her that we really want to become Baha'is, but we don't think we can afford it because all they could see was high class or upper middle class Baha'is in their community. So they thought to become a Baha'i, you need to be rich. Another participant told me the story about a prisoner in Iran who met a Baha'i in prison. And after he was released from the prison, he passed some of the sequence of Ruhi courses. And then he established his own small business in music industry. And now he and his extended family live a proper life. They also suggest in small communities, we change the perception towards economic issues as well as social justice. It is a given if you diminish the competition attitude and utilitarianism, familiar now, into the collaborative and cooperative perspective, and you will automatically become wealthy. Some others gave me the same answers. Some traditional meanings of the virtues could be updated by application of them in our everyday life, such as trustship. Another one said growth is not just spiritual, it is balanced combination of material and spiritual success. So they also gave me the idea that their main aim and objective was for justice and equality in their society. One of my participants' answer was very interesting, so I separated it from the others' answers. He is a young Baha'i in the UK, and he is very active in junior youth activities. He said that everything is for white people in his community. Discrimination against the people of color is all over. And he also said that white people are more sensitive to other types of inequality because they understand the inequality outside the shadow of race inequality. Also, they believe in faith less than minority and marginal groups, and their expectations are higher, so they understand the inequality clearly. He also suggested that they think more than the refugees about themselves and their families. Refugees think more about society and community, and it seems that they are more socialist than middle-class white man. He said British middle-class white people are individualists, but migrant families are more concerned about the communities such as Muslims and African families. He said that our activities, he meant junior youth activities, are more successful in refugees' neighborhoods. Wherever, this is the interesting sentence he mentioned, wherever people are less settled, we have been more successful. In our city, the first and the second generations of the refugees show more potential. He also said that you can find children from public school more interested in their activities than children from private school. So I think his answer also speaks for itself regarding justice, prosperity, and how their target community is marginal communities and migrants, even in European society. Faith equals praxis. The founders of the liberation theology, inspired by Marx, emphasized praxis and taking actions by the poor themselves towards freedom from poverty and oppression. Liberation theology is known for being against academic theology and supporting the experience of the individual in their everyday life. Therefore, it is a grassroots theology that suggests that regular people should be considered as real theologians. Thus, they established base churches, which is equivalent to study circles in the system, in every neighborhood and localities. In their base churches, they studied the Bible and interpreted the verses regarding their specific situations. They then take actions and practice their understanding within their everyday lives. The next meeting will also be about sharing the experiences and what they have learned from their experiences, and then they would improve their interpretations and understanding from the Bible. Paulo Freire applies this doctrine in his pedagogy of the oppressed. To develop this method in education and suggests that the current modern education system supports Western liberalism and maintains the oppression and exploitation in Latin America and other developing countries. He suggests each society should have their own version of education as well as their own theology. Accordingly, liberation theology is regular individual theology rather than schooling, academic, institutional, formal, church-based theology. The Ruhi Foundation has been an individual-based organization from the very beginning. Initially, it was only applied in Colombia, but it is now practiced by Baha'is all over the world and is highly supported by the Universal House of Justice. The Universal House of Justice emphasizes the vital role of individual and grassroots activities for teaching the faith as well as community building activities. In a significant and highly appreciated document, ISGP is in addressing the students and the lecturers at the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education, BIHE, suggests that none of the existing universities in the world could be an example for BIHE but Bondage, which is based on individual grassroots local action for knowledge production. The contents of this document are similar to Freire's opinions in education. So let's hear from my participants. My participants' answers also suggest that faith cannot be separated from praxis. They said, putting into action equals materializing the spiritual teaching. My conscious practice equals faith. Without practice, there is no faith. Being and doing should be together. What matters is that the solution for the problems of the society come from the Baha'i teaching. The faith doesn't matter. Faith is like a seed and the fruit is practice. The word of God produces energy for practice. People should practice, not just read. What is energy without practice? Spirituality is the potential that needs practice. So these are the answers and opinions and statements that my participants made that also suggest inseparability of faith and praxis, and even priority of praxis into faith. I don't mean the faith. So also there are very similar contents regarding the writings about Ruhi system or from Ruhi, different Ruhi institutes, Ruhi-based institutes, as well as liberation theology. They both use study circles in different ways. I'm not going to explain that. It is just there. You can see it. And it can be a matter of separate research, and it will be very interesting research as well. Another item that we came up with to compare these two systems are rejection of dualism between the sacred and the profane. For both liberation theology and the Ruhi system, people's life and their liberation from poverty and establishment of justice in societies are the vital aspects of their doctrine as well as activities. Liberation theology suggests there is no faith without freedom from the structural sin and liberation from poverty. Jesus was the prophet of the poor, and he sacrificed himself for their liberation from oppression. There is no significant order between the sacred and profane as it is in mainstream Christianity and most of the religious belief system as it is known and introduced by Mircea Eliade. In this regard, liberation theology is an earthly and this world religious movement that strives for the betterment of people's life. In some literature, it is even called secularized religion. Similarly, the Baha'i current system also tries towards the betterment of the world. The twofold moral purpose, which considers the growth of the individual and the growth of the local community, links teaching the faith to community building and removes the separation between spiritual and material civilization in a twofold moral principle. The Universal House of Justice in regards to the real civilization states that it is a balanced combination of spiritual and material growth that is reflected in Ruhi system enterprise, including all of the community building activities. Let's hear from my participants again. I could divide their answers into two categories. One category says that spirituality and materialism are inseparable, and another group of answers suggests that they are correspondent. So the inseparable answers, they state that spiritual and material civilization should be together. So they are different things, but they should be together. Career and work with the spirit of service is worship. Hence, material and spiritual growth are inseparable. I have been inspired by this concept from this participant. And there is the statement that I couldn't decide which column should I put. Spirituality is the potential and that needs practice. So I fairly put it in both sides. The groups of participants who made the statements that these two were correspondent said that putting into action equals materializing the spiritual teaching. For me, spirituality may as well be equal to healthy personality, appropriate mindset, and empowerment in human virtues, including integrity, honesty, spirit of service, avoiding prejudice, and kindness. The only thing that matters is the spirit of service to humanity. The rest is practicing it. Even window shopping, as well as Netflixing, can be spiritual and sacred. So I'm doing worshiping every evening. Spiritual and sacred, because it can heal a tired soul. I am a teacher, therefore my job is sacred. Every aspect of our life can be sacred if we put them at the service to the word of God. Detachment from the material life makes your life sacred, even when you eat from golden fishes. So, regarding all the similarities between these two systems, I could come up with some differences between them. When I say I mean my friends and I. They are here, I cannot lie about it. They were also involved. First of all, their nature. The nature of liberation theology is a movement within Catholicism against the mainstream church. However, the nature of the Ruhi system as a training institute is the dominant discourse among the Baha'is, supported by the Universal House of Justice. Regarding their political status, liberation theology has an obvious political attitude and statement, but the Ruhi system as a Baha'i approach cannot be political in a specific meaning of political, but in a broad way, yes, of course, it is also political. Limitation and generalization. This is my favorite. Liberation theology suggests that it can only be applied in developing countries, in particular in Latin American countries. And each society needs its own theology because of the different structures and the requirements of their version of poverty and oppression. They believe that theology is not applicable in liberal countries because of the nature of their structure and the poverty status in these countries. However, all of the Baha'is all over the world have applied the Ruhi system. In conclusion, I would dare to suggest that Ruhi Institute is at least highly inspired by the spirit of liberation theology, if not influenced by it. In the end of the interview, I told my participants that this research may find out that Ruhi system is highly influenced or inspired by liberation theology, and I explained briefly to them what liberation theology was, and asked them how they feel about that, because most of them were sacrificing and are still sacrificing everything to be active in this system. They even risk their life for this sake. So their answer was also interesting. They said, this system is universal and shows that learning is universal. Another one said, it is obvious nothing happens in vacuum. Another one said, this is the spirit of learning. And another one who was working in a network marketing said, there is similar method in network marketing as well with Ruhi system. It's just that we add real friendship and honesty to their method. Another one said, this shows we are not narrow-minded community and we benefit from every positive factors around us. The most common answer among almost all of them was this one. As long as the house is behind it, the origin doesn't matter. And I love the last one. I bet they have learned the aims and means from the Baha'i writing. That's why there are similarities. So this is it. And thank you very much for being patient and listening to this presentation. I know that it wasn't the best choice of the topic for the start, and I hope that it wasn't so boring for you.
Thank you very much, dear Shahla. Can you switch off your presentation, the screen, for we to see each other on the screen?
Sure, of course. Let me stop sharing.
Hi, dear colleagues. Again, maybe we all thank you for your report. Maybe questions, dear colleagues, to Dr. Shahla Mехргани.
I can see some questions in the chat box. Let's see. Okay, in what measure the present-day Baha'i movement is Persian concerning their cultural practice? You mean in Iran or all over the world?
I mean all over the world.
Well, I don't think the Baha'i faith is culturally nowadays as Persian as it used to be, especially after the guardianship of the Shoghi Effendi, the only guardian of the faith. He gradually changed the culture of the faith from being mostly Persian-based culture into the universal culture, or even the language. It used to be Persian and Arabic, the language of the faith. All the tablets and writings were in Persian or Arabic, but he started writing in English, and he also adopted a Western system to organize the faith. We call it the Baha'i Administrative Order, and he did that in communication with the Baha'i community in the United States. So nowadays, there are obviously, because of the roots of the faith that was in Iran, and many Baha'is in Iran, they have been influential during the history of the faith, but it's not that Persian-based anymore.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Do you know about Tolstoy's teaching, which has some common positions with Baha'i ideas? What do you think about the similarity? Tolstoy was familiar with Baha'i teachings. As far as I know, he also suggests that the key to the word peace is in the hands of the Akka prisoner, which was Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith. So I believe that Tolstoy was quite familiar with the Baha'i faith and its teaching.
Thank you. Any more questions, please, dear colleagues? Questions? Okay. Dear Shahla, may I ask you a question? I asked it to you in Oxford already. Is it really evident for Baha'i that the area of good and evil, of morality in general, and of values lays within the order of cosmos? We are the people of West. It's common for us that the sphere of morality and values is beyond the order of cosmos. And now, last time we were talking about the desire of them, of modern people, to feel this unity with cosmos through astrology, for example, through astrology. And how can exist this world sensation, this world feeling of your unity with cosmos? Is it something Neoplatonic or somehow else? Can you explain?
I hope that I'm able to explain it the way you're satisfied. Also, I can see that some of my friends and colleagues are here that they also can help me to answer this question. Tatiana, in Baha'i faith, in my opinion, in my perception, we believe in the unity of cosmos, and we believe that we believe in the unity of the Creator, and the only relationship between the Creator and all the creatures in this world is just because we have been created by him, or we call him because it's language. We call him, so we are created by him, but apart from this, there is no other relationship between us in the world, nothing in the world, and him as the Creator. Baha'is also suggest that that Creator is the pure being. There is nothing in that Creator except for pure being. Nothing, not any features or characteristics that we believed in him during the last course of religious coming from the manifestations of God, not the knowledge, not the being creator, not being mercy, nothing can explain his being. He is only pure being, no characteristics, no features at all. In between his being and this world, the entire cosmic world, cosmology, there is another realm that is called the realm of manifestation. So in his pure being, there is nothing wrong. There is no evil. Everything is just being, and being is the source of all the goodness. But when the creatures separate from him, issue from him, they keep their distance from him, then they become different from him, and they how to explain that? They become less and less perfect. So the lack of being that exists in the Creator is the source of evil. There is no evil exists in the world. There is no source for evil. Everything is good. Everything is goodness. Pure being is goodness. And the source of evil is lack of being. So if he is a perfect being, our world, our realm of existence, which is the realm of Creator, is less perfect. And this less perfection, the lack of absolute perfection, is the source of evil in the Baha'i faith. So that's how we explain the existence of goodness and evil in the world. I don't know if I answered your question, and
You did, certainly. Thank you very much. Questions, dear colleagues, dear friends? Boris?
Yes, thank you, dear Mехргани. It's very, very interesting what you told, and this topic is not much acquainted for me. I'm not a specialist here, but I have some maybe not too much specialistic question. But my question is, what kind of interreligious dialogue you have? You provide, your community provide. But as far as I know, as I understand, with Catholics, but besides Catholics, what about Muslims? And did you try to compare compare that social aspects of Baha'i theology with some aspects not only Catholic Christianity, but for example Orthodox Christianity, and maybe there are some relationships between Orthodox. It will be very interesting for me because I'm focusing on Orthodoxy most of all.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for asking this question. My motivation to do this research was because when I was doing my PhD, I attended a conference in Oxford when I met Tatiana for the first time, but it was years before that. I presented the Rūhī system and introduced the Rūhī system to the audience there. And among them was a professor coming from the US. He suggested, and he told me that, wow, what you explained was very similar to the liberation theology. I had very limited knowledge about liberation theology at the time. I remember that when I was part of the philosophy department in Shiraz, we studied it in very brief version of it, and I knew very little about that. But I was very interested to do a research about that. When I came back and I told my supervisor about that, he told, yeah, he's right. And you should do that. You should do the research about the liberation theology and the Rūhī systems. And I didn't have time, and it wasn't relevant to my thesis, PhD thesis at the time. So when I finished my PhD, the first thing I did was this research. But regarding the similarities between the Baha'i faith and other versions of Christianity, Islam, Zoroastrianism, and other religions, I would say there are plenty of research in this regard. I haven't done much research. I just did my bachelor thesis on the theology of Islam, Christianity, and Judaism and Baha'i faith. But not sociological comparison, because at the time I hadn't studied sociology yet. But yeah, there are plenty of similarities and differences, and also plenty of research. If you are interested, you can find them in Baha'i-library. There you can find many research comparing Baha'i faith, different aspects of Baha'i faith, and other aspects of Christianity. However, there are still fields available to all the researchers to do every research in the world. So it's still very new. So we have a long way to go.
I have one more question, if possible.
Of course.
Yes, thank you very much for your answer. But I know I also have to confess that I'm not a specialist, but so maybe my question is a little bit stupid. Maybe it's
no
not
such thing.
real. But when I attended Baha'i meeting many years ago. It was about 20 years ago in Russia. Baha'i community presented their ideas in Moscow. It was in Moscow, and they articulated the idea that for Baha'i creed is very appreciated and evaluated the property, private property. So I was surprised when I hear that Institute of Private Property is the highest value in eyes of God through Baha'i view. So I would like to, when I listen to it, and when I listen to your summary, I also was a little bit surprised, because in Catholicism there are no such assent for private property as in Baha'i. So in this sense, that's Baha'i created something unique. But I would like to ask: was it all the time? Or maybe it became only recently accentuation or emphasizing private property institute, or maybe it was not so emphasizing earlier, or not?
I think to answer this question, it requires more economic knowledge that I have, but I will just explain my personal understanding and perception from the faith. And I again ask other friends of mine who are here to help me with the answer. I wouldn't say that private property is preferable than like social or socialism or social properties. I would say that the right to have private property is reserved for people, as far as I understand the Baha'i faith and Baha'i teaching. It doesn't say that nobody is allowed to have their own private properties. But it doesn't also say that the government should own all the properties or the sources or whatever. What I understand is, even if you have a private property, you have to pay taxes for it. And the taxes are not low. And the more you have, the more you have to pay. And that's the accelerating tax purpose or tax in situation in the Baha'i faith. So there are not economic principles outlined and derived from the faith yet or ever, but people may have their own understandings and their own perceptions from all those teachings. So whoever told that, they have said their own understandings. So there is the right preserved for individuals to have their private properties, but it's not privatized towards the socialist system. In some aspects, I would even dare to say that Baha'i teachings are quite socialist, but not totally. So yes, if you ask me how Shohi Effendi, the guardian of the faith, sees the faith, more socialist or more liberalist, I would say more socialist.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. Very interesting.
Thank you. More questions, dear colleagues, please. You're welcome.
And I don't say that because I'm among the socialists.
That's good. That's good.
Okay.
Questions, dear friends, dear colleagues. Okay.
Dear Shahla, thank you very much for your presentation. It's very pleasure to see you in our university. It's very honest for us. And my question is very simple and maybe stupid, as Boris said. I would like to ask you about who is a God in this system? Because I think maybe more correctly said about social and spiritual systems, community and social practice more correctly than religion. How do you think about this question?
I join. Is God transcendent like in Christianity, Judaism, or
Yes,
or
yes.
Islam? I join the question.
Yes.
Thank you, Svetlana.
Yeah,
thank you.
yes. In Baha'i faith, as I appreciate it, God is unknowable unknown. Basically, we don't refer to him. We are not related to him. We are just his creatures, and that's all. Everything we refer to, every prayers, every worship, that they go to the manifestation of God, to the realm of manifestations. And we believe, Baha'is believe, that the manifestation of God is the one realm, and all the manifestations of God are reflections of that realm into this world. So Muhammad, Buddha, Jesus, Moses, and Baha'u'llah, and the Bab, they are all manifestations of God, and they are reflections that mirror the lights of that realm into this world. And that realm is also a mirror that reflects the reflection of God. And the realm of manifestation is the realm of all the attributes and characteristics, not God himself. So God is transcendent from everything, and we don't know him, and we cannot even refer to him as kind or worship towards him, nothing. He's just a pure being.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions, friends, colleagues? I think that's all. Then we are to thank warmly once more our dear Shahla Mехrgani. I hope we'll meet again whenever you will join us, maybe during our meetings. We are glad to meet you. We wish you and your family good luck, health and good luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tatiana, for inviting me. Thanks to all of your colleagues and my colleagues who were here to support me today. Thank you, everyone.
Good luck. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank yourself.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Shahla.
Bye.
Very
Thank you.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Goodbye.
very much.
Thank you.
Dear colleagues, дорогие коллеги, теперь извините на русском, у меня есть на самом деле по поводу